This video is going to discuss some of the general or overall APA style guidelines that you'll need to know when writing your literature review. Now, the goal of our research report is to provide a variety of different types of information. First, we want to say what was done, what was found, and how the study is related to other knowledge in the area. But before we really do that, you start off with this introduction, and that's going to be basically your literature review, plus you're going to come back and add some stuff towards the end of the semester to that. But so we want to introduce the reader to the topic. And that's what you'll be doing with your literature review, with those 6 peer-reviewed articles that you'll be reading and writing about. So a written description of a research study is going to include the following components. A clear statement of the purpose of the research. Now, you may not have that for your literature review. That might be something that you come back at towards the end of the semester and you add into that last couple paragraphs and tell us the purpose of your research, what you're actually planning on doing, and that's fine. A clear review of the relevant background literature that led to the research study, and that's what you'll be doing in this literature review. Description of the methods that are used. We'll come back in the second half of the semester after you design your experiment, and you'll provide me a methods section for your paper. A summary of the research results. So again, towards the end of the semester, after you've completed your experiment, you'll come back and you'll provide me with a results section. And then you'll have a discussion section where you interpret the results. So we start off with our introduction, then we have our methods, we have our results, and we have our discussion section. Now, you also are going to have an abstract that will go before, and that you'll do at the end of the semester, and then you'll have your reference section at the end. So this is what we're working on towards this first half of the semester, is really the relevant background information, and then maybe having the purpose of the research, maybe not explicitly what you're going to do, because that's not expected until after the literature review is turned in, but perhaps knowing what the purpose of the research is based on your background literature. So now we're going to talk about some elements of the scientific writing that are important. So it's important to understand that we're talking about formal writing or scientific writing. Now, this might be very different than writing you've done before. This is not your creative writing in English. This is not writing about a novel. It's very different. So you don't need fancy writing. So you don't need to, you want to be descriptive, but you don't want to use things like alliterations and onomatopoeias. I don't even know if I said that right. Analogies. I mean, unless it's absolutely necessary, it's very straightforward and to the point. So you're going to avoid jargon, colloquial expressions. Now, many of you might get your papers come back to you. Well, I guess it'll be online, but I might make little comments about things being colloquial. So if you don't know what colloquial means, it's just too much like everyday common language. So it's not formal, it's not literary, it's just too much like what you would find in normal conversation. So you shouldn't be writing this paper like you'd be talking to, you probably wouldn't be talking to your friend about this information, but let's say a classmate. You're not going to put, likes in there, it's formal. So just keep in mind that you're trying to write it in a formal style. It's impersonal as well. So the 7th edition does allow to use personal pronouns like I and we, but I really suggest trying to avoid it because it makes it sound much more formal if you say things like the researchers or the experiments. You wouldn't say things like I think or I believe. That's, again, too colloquial and not formal enough. Where it does allow you to use the I or the we is when you're talking about like we randomly assign participants to X, Y, and Z. Okay, that's okay. You're not going to use that universal we in your paper. That's not okay. So try to think of it being kind of an impersonal, just presentation of matter-of-fact knowledge. There's also some things out in verb tense we need to consider. So almost the entire paper will be in past tense or present past tense. Now, this present past tense is probably more commonly referred to as the past perfect tense. So, but basically, you're using past tense to talk about things. So when your literature review, all that literature reading was done in the past, right? When you're talking about your methods, this is where students have difficulty, is in the methods section. I'll repeat this when we go over that, is that yes, you haven't done your experiment yet, and you're writing your methods section up so I can approve it and make sure everything is on the up and up. However, once you turn in that final paper, that methods section will be in the past. So when you're writing that up, everything is in the past. And same with your results. When you're writing up your results, you've already collected that data, you've already analyzed it, it's all in the past. The present tense would be to discuss implications in the discussion. These are the limitations of our study, here's what our future directions might be. So that's okay, because that present tense could be going forward, what you're talking about. However, when you're describing your results in the discussion, it's still that past tense. So just keep that in mind. You want to reduce your biased language. So the AP manual goes into this a lot, especially in the 7th edition. So be specific and accurate. We'll have a couple examples in the lab, but you'll understand a little bit more about what this means. Be sensitive to labels. So the AP manual, again, goes into this a lot more in this 7th edition. And then acknowledge what the participants did in the study. So in terms of writing transition words, you want to, if you're implying time, then, next, after, while, or since, cause and effect, therefore, consequently, as a result. So these are just words that you might want to refer back to this or the lecture notes in order to help you when you're trying to transition from one thing to another. What are you transitioning from and to? Implies additional information, in addition, moreover, furthermore, similarly. Implied contrast, conversely, nevertheless, however, although. I'll say the word buts here, and that's fine if it's within a sentence, but don't start sentences in formal writing with but, and, or. And again, this is not creative writing. It is scientific writing. It's formal, okay? Another thing with scientific writing is be concise. And I know I am so guilty of not being able to be concise very well. But eliminate any redundancy and wordiness. So again, this is something that a lot of times students see come back as a comment on their literature review, is redundant. So the flow of how you're writing and summarizing things is important. So you don't want to restate things multiple times. Now, yes, you can use these article deconstructions that you're going to be completing to help you write your paper, but keep in mind you might not, there's several different questions. You might not need to use every component of those questions and put it in your paper. You might need to kind of cut some of that stuff out and then put that into your paper so that it flows nicely. So here's an example. They were both alike is wordy. They were alike. Better. Avoid the passive voice. You can click here, and I believe it takes you to a link in the lecture notes about what the passive voice is a little bit more. But basically the idea is that, here's an example. A number of things are indicated by these results. So this word by is really one of those things that triggers this passive voice, although it doesn't necessarily need to be there. And you can see by having this, it just kind of complicates. What's it really talking about here? So here's an example of the active voice. These results indicate a number of things, or further analysis suggested, showed, yielded, etc. Now again, APA very specific about manuscript settings. Everything's double spaced except for tables, but don't put extra spaces in. So everything's double spaced. You don't need 2 spaces in between paragraphs or headings or anything else like that. 1-inch margins. This includes the header. Left align, no hyphenation. So left should be all straight and flush, and then the right margin is going to be all wonky. You indent the first line of each paragraph. And the typeface. So 12-point Times New Roman has always been the standard for APA. However, I guess that it isn't the easiest for certain people to read. So the 7th edition accepts their fonts. So the 7th edition accepts the Calibri, which is kind of the default in Word now, 11-point Arial, or 10-point Lucida, Sans Unicode. And those are all your sans serif fonts. They're supposed to be easier for people to read, especially those that are visually impaired. Now the serif fonts, that's the Times New Roman, 12-point, 11-point Georgia. And in figures and tables and things, they really want the sans serif font, so a Calibri or an Arial. And the OWL at Purdue has this information as well. So if you didn't purchase the manual, which I highly recommend if you haven't gotten it yet, to get it, you'll find that the lab is going to be challenging without it. It's not that it can't be done, but this is all information that you need to know whether or not you choose to purchase the manual or not. In terms of manuscript organization, we'll start with a title page, then an abstract, then the text is your introduction, and then the rest of the literature review, your references, and your appendices. So each one of these with this little bullet point starts on its own page, including tables and figures. So what we'll work on in this first half of semester is the title page, the text, so that's your literature review. You have an introduction to your literature review, and then the rest of that is presenting those 6 articles, and then you'll have a conclusion, and then your reference section. We'll come back, and I guess in the text also includes that methods and the results and the discussion, which we won't be doing. So we'll only be working on that first part of the text or the body of the paper, which is that literature review or your introduction. And we'll come back and talk about appendices at the end of the semester.